Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Menachem Creditor. It's my honor to serve as scholar in residence and rabbi for UJA Federation of New York. We bring you Torah and music, blessing, and community every weekday. We've been doing so since March 18th, 2020. Today it is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. That is a whole lot of Torah, a whole lot of time. It's almost 5 years of Torah every single morning. It is broadcast 1,225. Thank you, Penny. It's good to see all of you. There's a lot to talk about today, but let's make sure that we start by saying good morning to each other. Arlene and Michelle, it's good to see you. Lisa, Boker Tov, Anya and Peter. Penny, it's good to see you on both platforms. That was pretty fast. Sunday, Boker Tov, my friends. Good to see you. Debbie and Rosa, Jonathan and Linda, Amy and Minna, Arlene, good to see all of you. Let's take a second to say good morning to each other and then we're going to get started. Susie, hope that you are well. Ellen, nice to see you. Deborah and Marcia. Marcia, I hear that we might spend some time in California together coming up. Thank you for spreading the good word there. Carl and Cecile, Rose, Tara and Joyce. Barbara, good morning. Hi, Deborah. Stan, good to see you. Hi, Corinne. Susan, okay. Shari and Lisa, Robin and Kim. Hi, Natalie. Good morning. All right. Amy, you are babysitting for your littles in Philly. That's the way to spend the morning. Adrian and Marilyn, Jack, good morning. Hi, Rabbi Steph. Nice to see you. Let's take a breath, sing a bracha, learn some Torah. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. It's so good to see all of you here. On Instagram, Shush, you are one Safta in a row on my screen. There's also Safta71. I'm not sure who you are, Safta71, but we've got two Saftas here, and Amy is visiting her littles in Philly. It's nice to see multiple generations present on my screen. It's a sweet feeling. And also wanted, as we begin our broadcast today, to do a little bit of a plug. I have been blessed um, to be afforded the chance to write and to publish by UJA. That's part of the work that I do, though it's not part of a job description. It's a lot of freedom of expression that I'm granted, for which I'm very grateful. Um, this is a book that just came out called Zionism is Just. Holding it on both screens so you can see it. Just came out 2 days ago, and it's a short book. You can see it's pretty small. It's 46 pages, and the subtitle is A Short Book for Those Who Struggle to Navigate the Complexities of Supporting Israel While Holding Fast to the Ideals of Justice. So again, the book is called Zionism is Just. You can find it on Amazon and buy it there, but I wanted to specifically invite anyone who would like to join a book talk that I'll be doing on Facebook Live It's my own Facebook, not UJA's. The link is now on the Facebook chat, but you can find me on my own Facebook feed where I just posted the link. You can join there if you'd like to be part of the live. A lot of the themes clearly are things we've spoken about, but I wrote this book specifically for those who have a hard time understanding and justifying within themselves what it is to be a Zionist because of their commitments to justice. So, if you know someone for whom this would be a um, useful piece of writing, a piece of reading, it's not a long read. It's meant to be accessible, and I hope some of you might join me on the book talk. I don't know if the link has been posted yet, but in case it hasn't, I'll ask some of my colleagues to post it. The book talk itself is on February 10th, 10 a.m. New York time. Thanks, Adrian, for asking. Okay, now, what we have in front of us is a big task, which is to talk about reality and to talk about the Parsha. We do this. We do this every day, but I find today's synergy between the Parsha and current events to be very intense. It is broadcast 1225. It is also the 475th day of war. And because of the arrangements in the ceasefire and hostage release deal, we have also been experiencing the visuals of Gaza itself. Many people ask, how do I and others deal with the devastation in Gaza? And I wanted to address that head on today, but I wanted to look at the Parsha as a helpful framing and anchor for the conversation. It doesn't make anything okay, and I don't want to in any way diminish the exquisite joy at having 3 hostages released back into their families' arms this past Sunday, and we anticipate breathlessly, with our hearts in our throats, the release of 4 more hostages this coming Shabbat. We don't know who they are. We don't know the condition that they are in, and that has made this next phase incredibly hard. And so join with me before I share anything from the Parsha or any of my other thoughts. Join with me in praying for the release of all of the hostages, all of them. And one piece of bright news as I begin, we are thrilled that Yuval Raphael, who was a survivor of the Nova Festival on October 7th, is representing the state of Israel at Eurovision 2025. And so I hope that you will join me in celebrating the miracle of her life and what she represents for us as a life force for our people through music at a global music celebration. Okay, on to the topic. Parshat Vaeira is many things, including the beginning of the plagues. And I want us to take a moment to think about what the plagues represent in Jewish consciousness. We likely, because of the way ritual works, think very quickly about how during the Pesach Seder, the Passover Seder, we reduce the amount of wine or grape juice in our cups with a recitation of the plagues, because after all, we cannot feel full joy if any of God's children are in pain. In fact, a very famous midrash says that when the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea, we began to sing. Another midrash says it was the angels, but let's take it upon ourselves, the complexity of this. And God said to the children of Israel, "How dare you sing when my children are drowning?" By which God refers to the Egyptians who were there to slaughter the Jews. Let me say it a little bit differently. The rabbis, in their imagining of how God experienced the death of the Egyptians, who in those days were the terrorists, had enslaved, taken hostage an entire people, and only through force let them out. You can see already how the text can be seen, doesn't have to be, as an overlay of this reality, without including God or the miracles or the plagues, you can see how the narrative begins to feel familiar. A people is taken hostage. And by extension, we've all been taken hostage. For the last 475 days, we have been in the tunnels. We cannot appropriate the horror of the experience, and I don't mean to speak in such an indelicate way, but we have been in there with them. That is how we have conducted ourselves. That is what we wear on our hearts. That is the way we speak. That is the way so many of us feel. And so, after a long period of time of the Israelites being held hostage by terrorists, afraid of them, and so they overwhelmed them with cleverness, God sends Moshe to say, "Set my people free." And Moshe, we'll get to him tomorrow, has a hard time accepting the task, but then is charged with implementing plagues on his own adoptive family. The first plague, the very famous one, is the plague of blood. And Moses first gives Pharaoh a chance to release the Israelites. And Pharaoh said, the kids' song, "No, no, no, I will not let them go." And God, through Moshe, says to Pharaoh, this is chapter 7, verse 17 and 18 of the book of Exodus, "Thus says God, by this you shall know that I am God. See, I shall strike the water in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand, and it will be turned to blood, and the fish in the Nile will die. The Nile will stink so that the Egyptians will find it impossible to drink the water of the Nile." Now, before we look at the plague itself and one of the commentaries that suggest it, just let in for a moment that in order to force Pharaoh's hand, this plague, God sends a plague that will make inaccessible the source of water for all of Egypt. The irrigation that Egypt was known for, flowing from the Nile into the fields, which is one of the reasons praying to God was always about rain, even in ancient Israelite tradition. Just look at the second paragraph of the Shema. God was going to dry up or make inaccessible by turning it into blood the source of life for all of Egypt, which is another way of saying, will condemn them to death as a consequence of their actions. Again, I take no delight in making these connections, but the visuals of Gaza make this a very important point to make, because whoever looking at the Exodus story would blame the Israelites or God for the plagues that Egypt brought upon itself because of its leadership. Now look at the verse itself. This is verse 19. I'm sorry, I have to look around one of my cameras. "And God said to Moshe, say to Aaron, take your rod, hold out your arm over the waters of Egypt, its rivers, its canals, its ponds, all its bodies of water, that they may turn to blood. There shall be blood throughout the land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and stone." So complicated. I'm not in any way addressing the complexity of the verse. I'm pointing to it, saying that it reflects the complexity of this moment. Who bears moral responsibility for what happens to the water in Egypt? The Egyptians, more specifically their leadership, in the biblical context, Pharaoh, for not letting the people go. The devastation in Gaza is a direct response to Hamas's massacre of 1,200 innocents across the border in Israel, including hundreds of young people at a music festival who gathered to dance, including peacemakers who lived in kibbutzim in the south of Israel, who spent their spare time bringing Palestinians the medical care they needed. And so while I don't want to only reinforce the horror of that for us, when we read this verse in this week's Parsha about the moral consequence, which was the plagues, and the rabbis being so reticent to see God celebrate the violence that happens through the plagues, they depict God, God's self, as regretfully implementing what is necessary to get God's people free. It doesn't happen gently, and it doesn't happen only with negotiations. The negotiations go through 10 phases in the biblical text, and all the negotiations in the end fail. It requires force. And for all of this, it feels awful. I might feel clear-headed about the moral culpability for the destruction in Gaza, for Hamas to have built an infrastructure under homes, which necessitates the destruction of the infrastructure and therefore the destruction of the homes. It feels awful to say all this. I don't feel good about any of it. After all, the rabbinic imagination has God saying, "How dare you celebrate when my children are dying," describing the terrorists themselves in the biblical text. If anyone deserved retribution in the biblical text, it was the Egyptians, specifically Pharaoh. And yet when they die, God is aggrieved according to the rabbinic imagination. Which means here we are. Here we are in a story that feels similar, while it is different. And while in the text it is God acting, here it is us. What a terrible, terrible feeling. And I want to share with you one comment. In Shemot Rabbah, in the classic commentary from 2,000 years ago on the book of Exodus, the rabbis look at the verse I just read, which is chapter 7, verse 19 of the book of Exodus, where God says to Aaron, "Take your staff and turn the Nile to blood." You might have heard that and said to yourself, what the rabbis do, why Aaron? Even though Moses wasn't willing to be the spokesperson, and so Aaron was going to speak for Moses, topic for a different time, you would assume that Moses would be the fulfiller through action of God's intention, but in this case it is explicit that it is Aaron who does it. What does that mean? This is what the rabbis in Shemot Rabbah say. Because the river had protected Moses when he was cast into it, therefore it was not smitten by him, neither at the plague of blood, nor at that of frogs. Because Moses was cared for, felt compassion toward the river itself. Therefore, he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Our sweet, fierce young women and men of Tzahal, Israel's defense forces, are in a completely unfathomable position, at least for me. I know, as I wrote, that Zionism is just. I believe this to my core, but it hurts so terribly to have to respond to this inhumanity. We have learned through Jewish history that powerlessness is not an option. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg writes that in a very powerful essay from decades ago called Judaism and the Ethics of Power. But as Rosa writes, Hirsch, Aden, and the other 4 hostages who were murdered in September of 2024, they were held in a tunnel, the entrance to which was a child's bedroom. As Rosa writes, It grieves us, but we did not choose that. What a horrible reality, friends, for Egypt in our text, for Palestinians today. And the images of Gaza really do make me think of this week's Parsha. The Nile was blood. Crops couldn't grow. People couldn't drink. We reduce our joy on Pesach in memory of those who hurt us. We will have to find a way through ritual, through conscience raising, through learning, through deed. It does not make the defense of the state of Israel unjust. It makes military defense a tragic necessity. We are called to have empathy and compassion. That does not mean we roll over and allow our children and grandparents to be taken prisoner with impunity. I offer you my heart. I don't feel comfortable about anything that I've said. It is not a good feeling. But this Parsha makes very clear that we have no choice but to defend ourselves physically and in our own hearts and souls, to remember that justice is our mandate, and that as we continue to speak of a liberation story, we know that until all people are free, no one is free. And by all people, I don't only mean, I'm using quotes, I don't only mean hostages. Of course, I primarily am thinking about them, especially now. But I mean Palestinians too. Freedom does not mean chaos. We weren't freed from Egypt to be aimless and chaotic, to cause harm because we have free will. No, we are called to see justice as our obligation. And in that way, I pray for justice for the sake of the Palestinians too. They deserve better than what they have. Every human being does. And if you wonder who I mean, given the crowds of civilians in Gaza when the 3 young women were released from captivity this past Sunday, this crowd that looked ready, God forbid, to act on them. Think about every baby born in Gaza right now. I mean them. They deserve better. Who would say that a child doesn't deserve better? Every child deserves better. And speaking about them with love and compassion, as our children too, is the mandate that Jewish tradition hands us today. We reduce our joy on Pesach when we celebrate our freedom, which means until they have justice too, our joy is not complete. It doesn't make me question our ethics. It makes me cry harder. And maybe with these tears, friends, our collective tears, maybe we can restock what the Nile lost on that fateful day. So with love in our hearts, and with prayers for the hostages, that they all come home now. Now. Send your heart to the east with me. Kolon balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefatei mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia. O lo avda tikvateinu התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, my friends.